Okay, so I may have a little bit of a cold and sound a little bit bad, but that isn't going to stop me from giving my revisited review of the 15-inch M2 MacBook Air. I've spent a good amount of time with the 15-inch MacBook Air, and even now I'm firmly believing that this will be the most popular MacBook, if not laptop, for just about all everyday users. With an insane battery life, a beautiful design, and far more power than an everyday user would need, it's easy to see why. Not all is perfect though, which is why I'll touch on some of the things I think it's missing, although it might not be that important for you. And over the last while, I've jumped heavily into editing, everyday stuff, as well as some gaming, so here's a review from a power user who isn't quite a professional. And if you don't want to stick around to the end of this video, my verdict is that I just simply wish this MacBook existed before the M1 Pro MacBook Pro from last year, since this would have been perfect for me. And if you're new here, thanks for stopping by. On this channel, I talk about gaming, tech, and a few things in between, so if you enjoy the video, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you don't, you're gonna get holes in your socks today, as well as a really bad cold like me. And I do want to give a huge thanks to Soundcore by Anchor for sponsoring today's video, but more on them in a bit. Alright, so jumping right into the portability of this thing, I'm pretty sure this is what the dream MacBook is for a lot of people. And I will say off the bat, I'm a mini tech lover all around, so I still prefer the 13-inch model. I am a little bit biased though, since I am always mostly docked, so I wouldn't really take full advantage of the 15-inch display. That said, the 15-inch display is honestly such a great size, and the fact is, this is still incredibly portable. This MacBook is legit barely over a centimeter thick, and it weighs just a little bit more than a bag of milk. It actually does weigh about 3.3 pounds though, which is far less than a lot of textbooks. In terms of the design though, I straight up love it. The squared off edges are similar to the Pro lineup, and it gives this whole MacBook a unique design. I did get the midnight colorway, and yeah, honestly, it's wild for fingerprints, but I don't really care to wipe it down non-stop. That's pretty unrealistic. So if that bugs you, maybe consider one of the other three colors. I did mention briefly in my initial review that the squared off edges made me a little bit worried about it digging into my wrist while using it, but after spending a little bit more time with it, this is a complete non-issue. Overall though, it's a pleasure to bring this MacBook with me just about everywhere I go, and it's only second to the 13-inch model for size to performance. Coming down to the screen though, I originally thought it was simply okay, but having used it a lot more, I really dig it. It's not the most impressive screen ever, but it's literally not trying to be, and that's okay. It's still wildly sharp and plenty bright. You can't even peep a pixel if you try, so what more can you really ask for? If you're on campus, outside, or at work or whatever, 500 nits brightness is still completely usable. And frankly, anything brighter would take a heavy hit on the battery life as well, which I will talk about in a bit. Other than that, everything I've needed this for has been awesome, and I've gone out of my way to not dock this at my desk to give the battery a fair chance. I've actually spent some time gaming directly on here, watching some Ted Lasso, editing, and really everything else. And if you're worried about the notch, seriously, don't be. Even 5 minutes after using it, you simply don't notice it anymore. Now, if you're torn wondering if the 15-inch display is better than the 13-inch, well, that all sort of depends on your workflow. For myself, I absolutely love the 13-inch model, since as mentioned, I'm docked up most days and I'm not using that larger display. If that wasn't the case though, I would most definitely be taking the 15-inch hands down, simply due to the versatility it would have in my workflow. And most of that comes down to editing videos. The extra screen here would make an actual impactful difference to my everyday workflow, and that can't be understated. And the beautiful thing too is that if you get one or the other and change your mind, you can't just easily swap it at the Apple Store and they'll be happy to take your money for either one instead of none. So yeah. And again, here's a comparison to my 11-inch iPad, my 14-inch MacBook Pro, as well as the 15-inch MacBook Air. Now I do want to take a moment to thank today's video sponsor Soundcore for helping me replace my ancient and decrepit OG AirPods. Soundcore has recently released their new product, the Liberty 4 NC noise cancelling earbuds, which have been a massive upgrade for me. With their 11mm drivers, they push an immense sound quality rivaling even Apple AirPod Pro 2s, but at a fraction of the price, coming in at only $99. If you're looking for some of the best active noise cancellation in a set of earbuds, Soundcore's Adaptive ANC 2.0 adapts to your ear canal and wearing conditions to reduce up to 98.5% of all external sounds. They'll even last longer than your MacBook Air with 10 hours of listening time and up to 50 hours with the charging case. And if you do need to charge up real quick, you get 4 hours with just 10 minutes charging time. And with additional features like high-res LDAC audio, multiple device connectivity, and low latency gaming options, these buds are really some of the best on the market. You can also fine-tune your listening experience with the Soundcore app to have a personal listening experience. You can find your Hear ID with the Soundcore app and really take your audio to the next level. If you do want to check these out, I will have a link down below in the video description, and thanks to Soundcore for sponsoring today's video. So getting back to the M2 Air, I do want to talk about the performance, since you're probably wondering how it actually works day to day. And long story short, even as a YouTuber with a smaller channel, this MacBook does everything I need it to do. To rehash though, my model is one step up from the base model, which only gives me a bump in storage. This model does have a 10-core GPU, an 8-core CPU, and 512 gigs of storage. And I have to say, please do yourself a favor and get at least 512 gigs of storage. The absolute base model 256 really isn't a lot. It's usable, but you will eventually run out. Now, even today, I'm not going to jump into any sort of tech benchmarks or whatsoever. That's kind of pointless to me. You probably just want to know how this performs day to day. And from gaming to editing and everyday things, this has actually far exceeded my expectations, especially considering the form factor. And for myself, I'm a bit of a heavier user compared to the everyday person that might be watching stuff or web browsing, but my video editing has been absolutely smooth as butter. And I don't actually see a difference between this and my supposedly more powerful MacBook Pro. My last couple videos have all been edited on here and exported full 4K in just a few minutes. And even scrubbing my timelines and adding effects were without any sort of issue. It's not like I'm ever racing against the clock or anything, but it's still really quick. And I've said it before, you're definitely not buying this for gaming whatsoever, but it does perform surprisingly well. Basic titles like Sims work flawlessly, and I've been really into this indie title, Life Goes On, recently. Platformer puzzles are pretty dope, I guess. Alright, so the performance is actually top notch, but where some of us might run into issues is the connectivity, meaning it's actually pretty limited. What you do have to work with does work well, but you've only got two Thunderbolt 4 ports, which might not be enough. For myself being docked up all the time, usually on a single display this is no problem since I got all those extra ports on my dock. But if you do want to hook up any USB-A's or an SD card like myself, you're out of luck. Not to mention you can only push to one single display at a time. And I've mentioned this before as well, you can always buy docks that will let you push to multiple displays, but this is a limitation unfortunately to the M2 chip. That said, we're talking about a MacBook here. If all of that mattered, you'd probably want to consider the Mac Mini. But this MacBook has its own display, its own keyboard, and trackpad, so really you're covered across the board with this alone. And since I really did use this a lot undocked on purpose, I did end up using the MagSafe quite a whole lot, and again, it does the job. I didn't have to worry about battery anyways, but when I did charge up, it's just nice to magnetically snap in and get going. And as talked about previously, the keyboard and trackpad are practically some of the best on the market, especially the trackpad. The backlit keyboard is actually super tactile, and it does have a good amount of travel. You can change the brightness of the keys if you need to as well. And even for a laptop keyboard, it's actually well sized, and I really appreciate the full size function row. When it comes down to the trackpad though, MacBooks are simply the best on this front, so much so that I use a trackpad in my desk setup. The haptic feedback is so satisfying, and nothing has quite come close to the responsiveness of Mac trackpads. I'm also a wild fanboy for Touch ID. It's just a fingerprint reader, but I love how well it's integrated into Mac OS, and it simply works. But talking about the battery, I was going to try and get this to fully die, but that almost seemed unrealistic. I was able to write, edit, upload this entire video, and many other things without even getting to 20%. Needless to say, this battery is awesome. Mileage will obviously vary depending on your day-to-day usage, but Apple says this will last you 15 to 18 hours. So even if you're fully charged before you start your day, you should be good by the time you're done. And if anything, I can always recommend the 70-watt charger instead of the 35, since at least you can charge up a little bit faster. Now coming in at $1299, this MacBook is by no means cheap, and it's still $200 more than the 13-inch model. Even though this is a dedicated review, it would be irresponsible not to mention some other options, that being smaller options like the M1 model at $1,000, as well as $1,100 for the M2 13-inch model. And I know it's not apples to apples comparison by size, but they are cheaper and they also perform super well. And if you do need a larger display like 15 inches or greater, the refurbished Mac Pros are still going to be a little bit more expensive, and honestly, performance-wise, they're kind of overkill. So with that, I think Apple has made the 15-inch MacBook Air an actual fair price within their lineup. And as mentioned, if this or the 13-inch model existed before the Mac Pro I use daily, I would have easily gotten the Air instead. So overall, I truly think the M2 MacBook Air is the all-around perfect MacBook in terms of price to performance and aesthetic. Obviously, if you're going to be jumping into any sort of 3D modeling and massive 8K editing, there's easily going to be a better option for you, but you might already know that. For everyone else, if you're in the market for a new MacBook, this is probably the one to get. But let me know in the comments, which option would you choose, the 13 or 15-inch model? Anyways, I appreciate you guys sticking around till the end. I'll leave everything in my setup link down below in the video description, as well as the Soundcore Liberty 4NC earbuds. Anyways, that's been it. Appreciate you sticking till the end. Till next time.